there's so many causes against that's plainly against imperialism to pick up, and yet they're standing on the Israeli side of the fence.
Operation, ask whoever you want, it's a legal occupation. America wants to pretend they're helping the children, but they just give Israelis the weapons to kill them. They give them the tanks for wrecking the buildings. The facts always come to light, you can never conceal them. Even as I spit and record this, people die and these evangelical Christians support it, forming an alliance with the Zionist lobby, while over here these spies are trying to stop me.
Hello, welcome to Non-Aligned Media. I'm Joshua Blakeney, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by Syrian Girl, who is of course the flower of Syria, although she's far from a shrinking violet because she has in fact been indefatigable in voicing criticism and advancing withering indictments of the ongoing attempt to destabilize her country by rapacious imperialists. And today we're going to be laying a wild theory to rest that's been allowed to coagulate in recent months and weeks. That theory holds that President Assad, who we all know to be the main nemesis of the Israeli government, the main obstacle to Israeli empire in the Middle East, that he is in fact working under the table and in cahoots with the Israeli government, which obviously strikes anybody who's read the Israeli media and the Israeli influenced media in North America that is currently demonizing President Assad as absurd. So Syrian Girl, could you please explain why it is that this theory has been allowed to emerge, what the motives are for this theory? I would surmise that it's those who are actually serving Israeli imperialism, trying to delude themselves that in opposing President Assad, they are concurrently opposing Israeli hegemony in the region, which I think is false. Please explain for us the origins and the prevalence of this theory.
Thank you for having me here. I just wanted to say that the Zionist media has always vilified the Syrian government, especially since 2006. However, in the lead up to these events, in actual fact, there was some Zionist media that propelled the idea that, and even in Western media, they propelled the idea that Israel is fearful of the revolutions because a government might arise that would be more extreme or Islamically radical, and it was touted as a fear. Now, this is a misdirection and misinformation because the fact is that there is not possibly a government to happen in Syria that could be any more anti-Israeli than the one that currently exists. I mean, I'm sure that there could be, but it would be very difficult to do so. It's extremely on a war footing, and that's why it's being attacked right now by the foreign NATO and Israel's allies, basically. Now, the whole premise that that Israel doesn't want to see regime change in Syria, the whole premise that Israel is afraid to see, what could come next, comes from the idea that Israeli and U.S. foreign policy is different. But in actual fact, if you look at history, it will show you that U.S. and Israel has always stood by each other. The foreign policy has not differed. In the United Nations, it's the U.S. that's always vetoing any resolution that's against Israel. It's the U.S. that gives aid to Israel. Israel is the U.S.'s best friend in the region. And it's ludicrous to think that the U.S. is going to take a foreign policy stance that could endanger Israel or that Israel doesn't like. The fact is that Syria and Israel have been at war for decades, and the most recent example was when Israel attacked Lebanon in 2006, and this Syrian-supported Hezbollah pushed the Israeli invasion out, and this showed, basically that the Syria-Iran alliance is formidable. So it's definitely in Israel's interest to see the Syrian regime fall. So at the start, there was all this misdirection, but the whole the people who are believing this are doing so because they want to believe it. Some in Syria's opposition are pro-Israel and anti the Syrian government, and some are in the opposition are against Israel, and they can't come to terms with the fact that they are aligning themselves with Israeli interests. So, in order to uh, uh, alleviate their conscience, they would like to believe that they, in actual fact, acting against Israeli interests. And there's all of these slander and conspiracy theories like of backward deals, and apparently Syria sold the Golan Heights to Israel, and Syria has no rights to it. This is one of the most commonly touted bits of information. But if you look at the source of such information, it comes from Israel itself. So it's funny for these people that are so against Israel to suddenly turn around and believe everything it's saying. And I hear all the time in left-wing media, in supposedly socialist magazines, they quote Israeli newspapers as evidence that Israel just really loves.
And if I was the Israeli government, I'd want that theory to be taken seriously by those who oppose President Assad, because then people would mobilize at the behest of Israel to fight one of Israel's enemies. So yet again, you'd have people being hoodwinked to fight Israel's battles for her.
Exactly. It's in their interest to do that. And I'm sure they had a time plan where they would change from being, oh, we're not sure if this is a good thing, to, oh, Assad's evil, he's killing his own people. And maybe that's what's happened. The initial coverage of Israel being afraid of the regime change in Syria is now turned into, Assad's gotta go, he's an evil man, because we really care about Syrians. Not that, just ignoring the fact that in 1973 we bombarded their civilian cities. So that's the irony.
Yes, comparatively, President Assad has a good track record in relation to Israel, because he hasn't sold out the Palestinians as much in comparison to the other leaders in the Arabic-speaking world. He's continued to demand the Golan Heights be returned. He doesn't have an Israeli embassy in Syria. In Damascus, there's no Israeli embassy as far as I know. It's not a country that's hospitable to Mossad agents running around the place. I mean, in Canada here, we have Mossad agents writing in the newspapers, I've been attacked by one. In most Middle Eastern countries, there are Israeli embassies. There are Mossad agents running around the main cities in the Middle East. But it would appear that Syria, if anything, is Israel's main nemesis other than Iran. And if we, isolate Iran as being somewhat unique in the region because it's Persian and it's not really part of the Arabic-speaking world, we can say perhaps that President Assad is the last bastion of dignity in, or personifies the Syrian people as being the last bastion of Arab dignity. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say he may be a symbol of it, because I think the figureheads are just this symbolic. The personification of the government has been rampant by the Western media, and they like to have their bad man. But Assad is, he's not the government. He is a figurehead, and the fact that people want him to stay is a defiant stance against clear imperialist agenda to change Syria's foreign policy. So yeah, I would agree with you that he symbolizes Syrian defiance against Israel and foreign hegemony. And you mentioned that there's no Israeli embassy in Syria. That's absolutely true. And in fact, more than that, if you're an Israeli citizen, you cannot enter Syria. And more than that, if you have even an Israeli stamp on your passport, you cannot enter Syria. So Syria is just, as you say, the last country in the Middle East, bar Palestine and maybe Lebanon, that is standing against Israeli power. And all of these countries that are in the region, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, who are against Syria and are allies with Israel, to to side with them, and then accuse Syria of being secretly friends with Israel is mind-boggling, like upside down world that just doesn't has no basis in reality.
Yes, yes. It always seems to be the case that whenever we're discussing matters pertaining to Israel, what's portrayed is actually an inversion of reality. So we're told that Assad is a collaborator with the Zionists, but it turns out he's actually the main antagonist of them. And so obviously I think my job situated here in North America is to try my best to prevent left-wing progressive people from being hoodwinked into supporting a reactionary imperialist agenda. You know, in the Cold War, many liberals sided with anybody as long as they were anti-communist. You know, even if they were reactionary, capitalist, restorationists like Václav Havel, for example, in Czechoslovakia. And likewise, today it would appear that many liberals and progressives are being hoodwinked into supporting anybody who is against President Assad, premised on their belief that, you know, anything is better than an Arab strongman. But if we believe in progress and if we believe in the betterment of the working class in Syria, surely it would be better to stand with those millions of sovereigntists who are, at least for the time being, siding with the government, choosing the lesser of two evils, and standing against and in hostility to the reactionary, destabilizing elements in Syria. So what's your message to left-wing people who are turning out at these rallies, waving the three-starred flag of the French colonial mandate, as you educated me about before?
I think that they should realize what they're seeing around them is not exactly what is on the ground. You know, they might see these people that fits their cookie cutter version of a revolution that they're trying to force onto the Syrian situation. You know, they have this idea and dogma about revolutions and stuff, but the reality on the ground is that these insurgents are funded by foreign imperialists, and they're basically traitors, and the Syrian people are not in support of it. Now, if it really was a grassroots movement that wanted to see change, and it wasn't sectarian, and it wasn't being funded by the foreign powers, then there wouldn't be anything wrong in what these revolutionaries are, what these left-wing groups are saying. But they're supporting, just as many of them did to Libya. They're supporting imperialism. That's what it is. They're on side with imperialists, even though they claim to be against it. And it's so strange that suddenly they are waving the tri-star flag when really they should be campaigning for Palestinian rights. Really, they should be campaigning for troops out of Afghanistan. There's so many causes that's plainly against imperialism to pick up, and yet they're standing on the Israeli side of the fence, waving the French mandate flag, with with people who are allying themselves with NATO and the Gulf states. So they should my message to them is please, just see things for what they really are.